There we go. Okay, so I am going to mute everyone right now with love, just so that we'll all be able to hear one another. And I want to just introduce myself. I'm Cassie Kale. I'm the rabbi of Temple Beth El in San Pedro. And I know we have a wide array of people who are here. And whether you are in San Pedro or if you are joining us from the other side of the world, I am so, so grateful that we get to be in sacred partnership with one another, studying together. So, oh, the other thing I didn't say is my pronouns are she, her. And I encourage everyone to use your pronouns if you're talking, just so that everyone gets to know you better and so that we can be respectful of everyone's gender identity while we are here. Okay, so I'm going to get my share screen ready so that we can begin. All right. Here we go. So today we are focusing on God and Jewish spirituality, and we'll talk about also what the other classes are that will be coming up. A few things, I think now 13 months into the pandemic, many of us are very, very familiar with everything on Zoom. But just in case someone isn't quite sure, you'll see on the bottom left of your screen, there's the mute and unmute button. So everyone is muted now. If you would like to talk, if you have questions at any time, feel free, of course, to unmute yourself. And the video is right next to it as well. And please make sure that your video is on. I think that's true with everyone here, because it's wonderful just to be able to see the faces of everyone who's in community. You'll see also the chat at the bottom. We will be using that chat momentarily. So just remember exactly where that is so that you can take part in it. In order to see just the speaker, if that's what you want to see at some point during this, if you hit speaker view, that will enable you to do that, or you can decide to change views. And I'm just going to encourage everyone to keep themselves on mute unless you're speaking, because if a lot of people are off mute, the sounds can get a little bit overwhelming, and I want to make sure that everyone is able to hear. Okay. So I want us to begin just by going over our goals here and how to create a safe learning environment for everyone who is a part of this community, who's a part of this class today. So in this class, my hope is that we can all agree to create a learning environment that values and supports curiosity and discovery, that honors and encourages questions of all kinds, that is safe, open-minded, and non-judgmental. All of us who signed up to be a part of this class, there is such a wide array of reasons that we signed up. So actually, I want us to have a chance to use that chat feature that we have in the bottom, and I invite you to click in the chat and just write a couple of words in the bottom about why you signed up for this class, just so that we can see from one another who might have had similar reasons for signing up. Learning more about Jewish faith, always curious about Judaism. This is wonderful. Great. I like that I have TAs here, always very helpful.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
We're just writing in the chat what has inspired us to be here today in community. Wonderful. And we can see there's similarities between us, but there's also some differences. And that is absolutely a blessing that we can all be here with one another. So you can see we have a lot of people who are here today. We have 45 participants now. There's about 62, 63 people who signed up to be a part of this. And so we have a wonderfully diverse and large community here. And we will have opportunities to kind of get to know one another in smaller groups. Today, we're only going to have one breakout group. The rest of the time we'll be spending all together. And I would love to just invite you also that as we're going through I want to invite everyone to stay on mute just to keep things a little bit easier to hear. That today we're going to be going through a lot of material. It's going to be focused around God and spirituality. And since we're going through a lot of things, you might have questions. Those questions, as I said, are encouraged. It's a wonderful thing to be able to ask and to get feedback on questions. So I want to encourage you, if you have questions about things that aren't related directly to what I'm talking about, write it in the chat or send me a message later on, kind of parking lot questions. Because since there's so many people here, we might not be able to get to all of them, but I'll do my best to incorporate them in here. Wonderful. And I love how those answers are still coming in. Okay, so that is our parking lot right there. What I want to do is to give everyone an opportunity to kind of just start from the beginning, right? We're going to start with, what is it that you know about Judaism? And then we're going to go to, what is it that you wonder about Judaism? And then this last one is going to be something that we'll revisit at the very end of, what is it that we learned today about Judaism? So going back to the very first one, I invite you to unmute if you have something to share, and I will write it into the document.
Judaism is one of the first monotheistic religions.
Okay. Great. What else do we know?
We pray directly to God.
And we are the chosen people.
Our prayer books use the pronoun we, us, our.
There seems to be a very big emphasis on justice and, again, speaking your mind against injustices.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you.
I think
it is,
also, you go ahead.
It is the foundation of Christianity and Islam.
Judaism kind of teaches you to be basically like critical thinking, you know, and kind of try to question and look back on, I guess, past teachings with humility.
Yeah, there's a really big emphasis on questioning.
The emphasis on tzedakah and the understanding that it technically, that its actual meaning is to like do what is right, not to do what is like kind, and the understanding that when you're treating other people well and helping them when they're down, it's not out of kindness, it's because it's the right thing to do.
Right. And that's getting into like the meaning of what is tzedakah really? Is it charity, or is it just doing what's the right thing? Great.
We're personally responsible for our words and our actions.
These are wonderful.
We follow the Old Testament.
I was going to say that the way you act and treat people first is how you're a good Jew, and your faith comes second. Your faith is not as important as how you act and behave.
Our deeds over creed, right?
Yeah. That works.
Thank you. I can't seem to go back to fix the spelling of testament. It's not letting me do that. Sorry.
It's a non-proselytizing religion.
Nice.
Interesting.
Great.
We are a minority.
We don't count though.
And I see there's a few things in the chat as well, that there's laws, patriarchal.
It's as much a culture as it is a religion.
Okay, good. I know this is getting a little bit small over here, but I think this is a really good list. Is there something else that isn't on here that really needs to be?
Still evolving.
Go ahead.
Still evolving.
Right. Even in Reform Judaism, we very purposefully don't call it Reformed Judaism, right? The Reformation is still happening. We're still evolving. That's great.
Israel is our home.
Also, the fact that there's different ways of being Jewish, from Reform to Orthodox to conservative. And for me personally, I don't relate to I would like to find ways to relate people that are more observant than I am. I almost feel like it's a different religion.
I was going to say too, from what I've been told by the temple that I'm attending, is this was something in my Christianity teaching growing up, but each day, if you're Jewish, isn't like a test from God. So you don't need to worry about each day being so, a test.
So what is each day? I want to understand a little bit more of what you're saying.
Oh, so basically, I was worried, I guess, when I was getting into it, like, oh, is each day going to be like, a test of my faith or test of my, person being, things like that. And
did you feel like that from the from people around you or from God?
I felt like that from, people around me, because they're very, Christian thinking, and they think, oh, well, you have to, think in this manner. If you want to be a good Christian, you have to, obey. And I don't know. I don't want to get into the whole thing. I don't want to cause a racket or get off track.
But just the idea that that's not the case. Thank you. How do you pronounce your name?
Jure.
Jure, wonderful. Thank you, Jure.
That's pretty.
Awesome. I think this is a really great list. Going into the wonders page, what is it that you wonder about Judaism?
I wonder about tzedakah a lot. About what it means to each person, or what it should mean to me. I mean, I know there's a little box with that we keep, but really, what does God want me to feel about that?
So basically, tzedakah, if you're not familiar with that term, it's like money that we collect to give to a variety of causes, helping people who are poor, helping with all sorts of things that might be near and dear to our hearts.
Does somebody decide, divvy it up, what have you?
Each individual can choose about that. I think these are great questions. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll be able to get more into that in a couple weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder about our concept of heaven and hell, what that means to us. And
great.
I actually just saw a movie or something where someone actually mentioned they said, oh, it's the underworld for Judaism, and I didn't even know it was such a thing. There was such a, I was taken aback because I've been just told by another person, not read myself, but told that that's not, it's like a non-issue.
Yeah, but there's a lot of different teachings about afterlife and these ideas.
I guess so.
Yeah. What else do you wonder about?
I wonder why the Holy One was silent when horrible atrocities are happening, including the Holocaust, the Inquisition, and also non-Jewish atrocities, but especially the Jewish ones. Where was the Holy One?
Very difficult question. Thank you, Myra.
As a Christian, I've always wondered why some Jews followed Christ and others didn't.
I'm trying to understand what you, like why some people became Christians as opposed
Correct,
to,
yes.
Got it, okay.
No.
I wonder about the organizational structure of Judaism. Christianity is very hierarchical, regardless of whether you're Protestant, Catholic, whatever. And Judaism seems to be more community-based without, there's no pope, for example. So what's the structure?
Great question. Oh, I noticed that there are things coming in the chat as well. Yeah, I can't see everyone, so feel free to unmute and to jump in.
Hey, I'll jump in then. I thought I heard somebody say a minute ago that one of the things we take for granted as a Jew is that Israel is our home. Maybe I misheard it, but I'm wondering. I've been to Israel. It's a nice place. I don't feel it is my home. I feel like the United States is my home, or maybe Canada, which I thought about moving to when I really felt none of my neighbors shared my values for the last 4 years. But am I supposed to feel like Israel is my home and I'm just like a renter here in the US or Europe?
Great question. In Israel, it's something that's really central, and yet there's a lot of complications there. I totally understand that. It's a really good question.
Can I clarify what I was thinking or saying when I was saying that, or when we were saying that?
Well, I didn't mean to attack you in any way. I just know a lot of the Jewish people I know really, are from Israel. But I didn't want you to contradict you. But I'm just wondering, because I know 1 million Catholics who've never been to Italy and they don't feel like the Vatican is their one true home and renters here.
No, absolutely,
It's not
absolutely
it's our
not.
home as a people.
When we're in the United States, it's basically Christian. We're following Christian rules, the Christian society, and we accept that, and we're sort of guests in a Christian society. When we go to Israel, everything is Jewish. Everything shuts down at the Sabbath, and the elevators stop at every other floor so that you can walk. I mean, it's all Jewish. They don't mix milk and meat. It's all Jewish, which is really what I meant. When you go there, it's like Jewish camp.
I wonder about how Jewish law plays in today's role in Judaism. That might be a silly question.
That's not a silly question at all.
So, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I have a question, which is, I want to understand how, the Judaism believes like Jews are the chosen people. At the same time, it appears to me as an outsider that there's lots of different ethnicities of people who are Jewish. And that's a bit confusing because you would have thought that, that if it was just one tribe or one group of people 2,000 years ago, yeah. So
that's a great question.
And I just have one last one for me. I kind of wonder why, at least with this particular form of Judaism, why there's still some sense of maybe just gendering, if that makes sense. Because, I was looking at things and there's still kind of like, a man and a woman. And it's kind of, I'm kind of speaking vaguely here, but you know, where do the people go when they don't maybe necessarily identify either? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot of people actually don't know that going back to Mishnah, we're talking almost 2,000 years ago, there actually were 6 different ideas of gender within Judaism. And so there's a lot to explore there. There really is. And I didn't even know very much about it until recently. So
Yeah, I had the same question because I'm non-binary. I wasn't able to figure out Zoom. But I guess one of my main concerns, I have a few, is how is gender handled?
yeah, great question.
I wonder why Messianic Jews consider themselves Jews rather than Christians.
And I see there's also a question in here about denominational differences.
I was also curious about how Reform Judaism deals with kind of inherent contradictions, just because when I read the Tanakh, obviously that comes up. And one answer when I was raised in kind of a Chabad environment was just about the need to study with each other and to debate those things, and that you divine the truth by doing that sort of thing. And that's not as simple as rule-based stuff. But simultaneously going to Chabad synagogue and dealing with a lot of Orthodox Jewish people, they also seem to oftentimes have very strong opinions about certain rules and other things. So,
yeah, the contradiction of being a human being, right? We should debate, and yet you should believe what I believe. This is a really, really great list. And I don't know that we are going to, I'm sure there's many more questions that we might have as they come up. I don't know that we're going to be able to touch on all of these because truly there are so many great ones here. But hopefully we can factor some of these in. And I will be going back to this list also and preparing the next couple classes to see if there are ways that I could weave some of these in. And of course, if you have other questions that come up or if you want additional resources around things, don't hesitate to reach out. Oh, I see there's also something about Kabbalah in here. I'll just add that quickly to that list. Okay, great. So like I said, we're going to return to the learn one at the end of class today. We don't need to fill that in quite yet, but you'll see this picture here of a rope. And essentially our 3 classes in Taste of Judaism will focus around 3 different really important pieces of Judaism. One is God and spirituality. That's what we're covering today. One is Torah and text and that learning that's so important to our culture. And the last one is community and how people and being part of a larger group of Jews is so incredibly important. And I think we can understand that no matter what our background is, how important each of those 3 aspects can be for our own faiths. If we aren't Jewish and for ours if we are. So today we're going to be focusing, I'm going to start to transition us into looking at a few texts in particular. And when we look at these texts, we're going to be thinking about what happened in each of these texts, kind of in our own words, having the chance to try to internalize each of them for ourselves. There's these 3 texts that we're going to be focusing on. In the text, what is it that God does? And then try to describe God's characteristics in this passage, what adjectives we might use to describe God or God's actions. Okay, so this is the first text, and you also have this text on the sheet that I sent out, so if it's easier to read on there, I invite you to do so. Would anyone like to read this text out loud?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Dan.
God now said, Let us make human beings in our image, after our likeness, and let them hold sway over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the beasts, over all the earth, over all that creeps upon the earth. So God created the human beings in the divine image, creating them in the image of God, creating them male and female. God then blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and tame it. Hold sway over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and over every animal that creeps on the earth." And God said, "Look, I have given you all seed-bearing plants on the face of the earth, and every tree that has in it seed-bearing fruit. These are yours to eat. And to every land animal, and to every bird of the sky, and to all that creeps on the earth, in which the breath of life, I give all green vegetation for food." And so it was. God then surveyed all that God had made, and look, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
I feel like I need to give you an applause. That was beautifully done. Thank you so much, Dan. So as we're looking at this text here, what exactly is going on? Who wants to just describe this in your own words?
I've got a question about the first sentence where it says, "Let us make human beings."
Yes.
Who is the us?
Us.
That is a phenomenal question, Irv. And truthfully, we could probably have an hour and a half just to talk about that, because the rabbis have all different sorts of ideas about who that us might be. Is it God talking to the angels? Is it God in the plural sense, in the royal we, right? There's a lot of possibilities there. And what's really interesting, and I'm glad you asked this question, what's really interesting is that whenever we're reading the Torah, there's not one way to read it and understand it. Earlier, I'm trying to remember who it was who was talking about the importance of studying together in community and how we bounce ideas off of one another. Well, there's an idea that every single one of us was present when the Torah was given, except every single one of us receives it in a slightly different way because all of us are individuals. We all have our own little unique divine spark. And so when we add our understanding of the text, and when we all can come together and share it with one another, we actually get closer to figuring out what the reason is. We can uphold multiple truths at the same time. So there's no one right answer. I guess the question really is, what do you think the right answer might be? And that might change from minute to minute. I know with me, sometimes it does.
Rabbi Cassie, if I may ask, you mentioned a minute ago that 2,000 years ago in Judaism, there were, I think you said six different understandings of gender. And line 4, which I know has been used out of context too much, is creating them male and female.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on that at all? Without, I know this is another 2-hour conversation, but
yeah,
any insight there?
I mean, that's a really, really good question. It's important to note, yes, there were 6 genders that were mentioned really long time ago. I hope our understanding of gender has progressed since then. I think it has. But it was seen as there were males and females. And here there's a real focus on procreation. So it makes sense how it shows up here. There's only one male and one female. There's only 2 human beings on earth, right? The other understandings of gender, I mean, I don't want to get into all of them right now. I'm more than happy to share those resources with you. I have a text sheet I've put together on that. But it's like minority. Like now we have an understanding that there is something called non-binary, that people might be, I mean, there's lots of different potential genders that I believe there's something like 26 that I've heard of now. But then it was just rudimentary understanding of gender. So it wouldn't come up in this formational text.
Creation.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
For me, I thought it's absolutely fascinating that he uses, or the citing uses the term sway over, and it uses it twice, rather than rule, rather than master, rather than dominate. However, before the second one, the phrase tame it is used as if we're in charge of making everything right that should just be perfectly right as it was designed. So that's hold sway is a really interesting, it's just caught me.
It is, and there is some contradiction in that.
Yeah.
There's a phrase in there that sounds like to me that we weren't allowed to eat meat yet. It just sounded seed-bearing fruit. These are all yours to eat. It doesn't get into eating meat yet. So somewhere in the future, I guess, it was determined that we were allowed to eat meat.
Yeah, that happens well later. And that also is another very, very rich discussion, Irv. There's a lot of people who say that originally we really were supposed to be vegetarian. And over time, God said, fine, have meat, just don't hurt each other. And that kind of thing. But again, like there's an idea, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And so there's lots of different ways to look at all of this, right? I noticed in the chat also, I'm just trying to kind of catch up with all of that. Judy mentioned that she has trouble with this passage because it sets in motion humans' dominion over the natural world. And certainly we can see that here. There's lots of different parts of this. And I think, Richard, you pointed that out as well, this kind of ruling over that's going on here. So, I mean, if we're looking at this, if we were to describe God's characteristics based on this text, what adjectives might we use?
Extremely powerful.
Okay, powerful, absolutely.
Very powerful, but I also kind of get the feeling that he is making us in his image, creating us in his image, and kind of setting in motion almost kind of like a clockwork, but he's also very hands off also. It seems
like handing it over, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. That's the feeling I'm getting.
Yeah.
So and it's contradictory as well. I mean, I'll say that again. Rabbi, you said that. There's some contradictory things going on there.
Absolutely.
You know what I like about this what I like about this and the concept of God here, if you like look at other creation myths like Greek mythology or something, they're like the gods are very humanistic to me, whereas like, Zeus is the male, you got Zeus and Diana, and they all like really resemble human beings and they're meddling in our affairs and that sort of thing. And this God it's like a mirror looking at a mirror. You don't know what is reflecting what. You contemplate this idea of God and it opens you just wide open to, this is attempting to describe how everything got here and our role in it. That is, and when you, and that's very powerful. And it's very, this is endured through millennia, because I think that it retains a very powerful mystery, which we will never get to with all of our tools of science and blah, blah, blah. We're searching. We will never get to the answer definitively of how it all came about. Mm-hmm. So that is what it's myth. It is a kind of myth, but it's like bigger than those other myths to me, because it's kind of blank. It's this like, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's like all encompassing.
It's all encompassing. It can contain that. It can contain that. You can keep interrogating it and it doesn't yield, and that's really cool.
What I read here is God has given us all the tools that we need. And now it's up to us to take it over, to tame it, to grow and multiply. I can't see the rest of the text now because I see Dan.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, those kind of things. So now you don't expect God to do for you. God has given you, and now it's up to you to do.
So it's empowering. And I saw that in the text and in other places as well. In the text stream, I saw something else that sounded like this going forth or starting of a journey. And that's what's happening at the beginning. That's beautiful. I also see in the text this idea of powerful yet humble, generous yet empowering. Again, these contradictions, but we can see the resonance of every single one of these within the text itself.
What also strikes me, again, I was raised Catholic all of my life, is that God is all powerful, but like he doesn't set the rules. Like he does set the rules, but he also gives us the ability to question those rules, and our autonomy is celebrated. And we're not powerless as people. Like our fates aren't set in stone for us. And what's so great is that questioning is, again, celebrated. And it's something that it seems like God almost wants us to do.
I think there's also something that's missing in that part of the creation story. So even though it's giving us dominion over, it doesn't say that we have a responsibility. All these things, we have dominion over it. It doesn't say we have to make sure that we conserve it, that we can make sure it lasts, that we don't overfish the seas, that we don't destroy species. That's not spoken to here. I'm sure it's covered elsewhere.
Yeah, it is, and the commentaries speak to it, but you're right, it doesn't show up directly in this text. Sorry, who was speaking?
Me. To me, it shows that God has chosen us, that we as humans are the chosen people in his image. And then it goes back and forth, but the enduring message is that we have free will. And I think that we don't have to follow. He just kind of lays it out there and says, here it is. You might want to go this way, and I have some guideposts for you, but you have free will. And I think that's the foundation for me of Judaism, is that it's life. Have
Seems
free
like
will.
life.
And exactly, I see it as choose life. I mean, he's talking about being fruitful and multiplying. I give you the seeds. I give you the breath of life. Everything is about, okay, I've given you all the tools, like you've all said. So I've given you the tools. Now go live, go play, go live, go breathe, eat, and have all and multiply.
Yeah, he wants us to partake in the pleasures of like earth. He wants us to be happy, and he wants us to take full advantage of the earth that we have and the lives that we lead.
And another thing with God too is what I'm understanding is that God is giving us the ability to create, like, he can or they can, so we may not be able to do the same things, but he's giving us the ability to grow our own vegetables, have children, do things like that. I guess that's kind of what I'm kind of understanding.
Right, the ability to create. That's great. And I know there's so much more to dive into here. I love everything that I've heard, and I'm sure there's a lot more we're thinking of. But I want to bring us to the second text because I want to make sure we have time to do it. So this next text is a text about redemption. Would anyone like to read this in the English? There's no Hebrew here, so it would have to be in the English.
Now Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. An angel of Eternal appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? When the Eternal saw that he had turned aside to look, God called out to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. He answered, Here I am. And God said, Do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. And continued, I am God of your father's house, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And the Eternal continued, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt and have healed out their outcry. Yes, I am mindful of their sufferings. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians. Come, therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. So who wants to describe this text, what we just heard?
It's the story of Passover, right?
Yeah, it's the very beginning of the story of the Exodus and being able for Moses to stand up and say, let my people go, so that we would ultimately be freed.
Well, here you have a human being interacting with God in a burning bush. And he's like, I heard you got to go do this. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do we describe God here?
Well, I guess just a voice, really. There's just a voice and there's not really any visuals. And he's telling Moses, I heard your pleas. Now I'm going to help you help your people. So
yeah, he empowers Moses to help his people. And he doesn't act directly, which is so telling to me. Like, he acts through Moses and he tells Moses these things.
I'm gonna say it's really an act of faith, right? In its most kind of purest form, I think. It's interacting directly but indirectly. And so it's asking you to believe and take the risk or the chance. And I mean, that's faith, right? You gotta just believe.
Yeah, it's not an easy ask, is it? And I see also in the text that here he's a fatherly figure, that God is acting as a father. Or was that the last text, Judy?
No, this text, because
okay.
He's saying, I am the God of your father's house, the God of Abraham. He's saying, I gave life to you.
Thank you. Yes. Any other adjectives that might come to mind to describe God here?
Energy. A
Eternal.
burning bush is energy, potential.
Yeah.
When I think of a burning bush, I think of it's the potential, energy, and stuff.
And the bush is not being consumed.
Right.
Right. And that's the other piece of it. That's so interesting, right? Because it wasn't unusual for there to be a bush on fire in the desert. What is unusual is that the bush was unconsumed. And yet Moses needed to pay attention long enough to see that. And that in itself was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And for me, the text shows God as being involved. And for so much of Jewish history, he's not involved. And for all of the questions that came in about, the Holocaust and why wasn't he there for us? Well, back there, he was like, not only am I here for you, but I'm going to tell you what to do and I'm going to help you do it. Involved.
That's a great question,
Moses
Richard.
noticed.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I like this passage in particular for pointing out, I am mindful of their sufferings. I feel like that's a big theme in Judaism, right? Suffer. And so here you have this kind of foundation that maybe suffering is part of faith. So that's what I take from this.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, maybe there's more burning bushes and we just don't see them.
I get the feeling that Moses needed a pep talk and some, it was overwhelming and he had this giant task and he needed reassuring that he had support emotionally and of course he didn't know the miracles were coming, but he left feeling a lot stronger and able to lead.
Yeah, it happened with the whale too, so why not here?
I'm fascinated by near the bottom where it says, I am the God of your father's house, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So we're talking about the God of the past, and then it continues, and the eternal continues. So what you have in this passage is a concept of eternity, that it is not, you have life, you have death, that's the end of it, but there is something more.
So that's really interesting that you bring that up, Liam. So the idea here, where it says eternal, that's actually one of God's names. That's God that's being referred to there. And we're going to get into the names of God in just a few minutes. So that's going to be one of them that will pop up. Thank you.
I'm a little confused about one thing here, which is that he says, my people in Egypt, and I understand it. But I wonder what God's concept was of the people in Egypt. That they couldn't have had a separate God. The Pharaoh and like the people who are not his people. I mean, there are also some God's people, but there's only one God. So,
right. Yes, absolutely. I get what you're saying. Right. There's only one God, but there are people who are following God and there are people who are following other religions.
Right. So I guess the distinction is being made between the righteous or someone who is following. And then I guess one way of understanding this would be my interpretation is that Moses needed to hear something, given the era in which he lived, he needed to see a burning bush. And that's what he saw, because that is what would tell him or would jolt him enough to go on to do what, this exactly the sort of pep talk that he needed that was appropriate for him. So.
Yeah, and that relates very well to another one of the comments in the chat of God as a worker of miracles. There's this miracle that he got to see, and that's representing God.
He needed some sort of sign, like like you said, like a miracle, but like encouragement from someone other than himself to do something, because it seemed like there was not much hope. So why even bother? And then there was a voice.
Yes, and I guess I just thought of yes, you can follow this human being in the name of what God wants you to do for this Exodus.
So there's like a calling aspect to this, you're saying?
Yes, and even though we have to be clear there is one God, sometimes we do need to follow a human being as leader. Leaders are there for reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
Superficial way of saying it. I would like to dig deeper eventually.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? We only have an hour and a half and we're covering a lot. So it is limited how deep we can get with some of these texts, but I hope it's a starting point. I think all these questions and comments are a wonderful entry point. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into ideas of God in just a second. I just want to bring us into this final text that we're going to be looking at right now. And this is Revelation. This deals with the book of Deuteronomy. So would anyone like to just read these verses?
I can do that. It's the last paragraph, right?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
So Moses summoned all the Israelites and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the laws and rules that I proclaim to you this day. Study them and observe them faithfully. The Eternal, our God, made a covenant with us at Horeb." I don't know how to say it, sorry.
Yeah, that was right.
It was not with our ancestors that the Eternal made this covenant, but with us, the living. Every one of us who is here today, face to face, the Eternal One spoke to you on the mountain out of the fire. I stood between the Eternal and you at that time to convey the Eternal's words to you. For you were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain, saying, I, the Eternal, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods besides me.
Okay, so what do we understand about God from this text?
I think just the reminder that He is the one. There is one. You may have followed Moses, out of Egypt, and you may have followed him devoutly too, but still there is God, and that's different.
I believe that God and the Jews or Israelites made an agreement that they would follow God. They were one of the peoples that agreed to follow the laws of God. And I think that's what he's saying here. You made a covenant with me. And so now, I will help you and we will go forward.
And that word covenant is just so important there. Thank you, Gail.
And yeah, he doesn't say that, again, our ancestors and people who came before us are responsible for that covenant. Who's responsible for it are the people in the here and now. And we're constantly making that covenant.
Actually, I should say that confuses me a little bit. Is that supposed to be something that's also true at every time and age, like including today, or? Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Sorry, I'm revealing my ignorance. But...
No. This, first of all, this is a Taste of Judaism class. Second of all, there is no such thing as a stupid question. Every question, everyone is welcome here. And your question is actually a phenomenal one, right? Because the rabbis speak to it quite a lot, actually, that there's this idea that, yeah, we received the Torah, we received the laws a long time ago, but the rabbis say, no, don't be so quick. Actually, who is present to receive the Torah? It's anyone who was ever part of the Jewish community, even people who died long before, even people who have not yet been born, people who are born Jewish, people who became Jewish, people who aren't Jewish, but who consider themselves linked in some way with the Jewish community. Every single one of us is present to receive the Torah and always in the here and now. And so your question is a great one. It's a really important one.
I really like this point. I don't really have anything to say about it, but I think that's like the beautiful thing about Judaism, right? Is that it has that inclusion into it. And, it's known as a tribe for a reason. And I think that's really made an example of. I was watching a movie the other day and it was Jewish based, and they made a comment about how converts aren't real Jews. And I thought that was really, really aggressive. And I'm like, I don't think that's right. And so I just find this particularly comforting and very important, maybe going through with that perspective of this passage. That's it. That's all. I didn't have anything profound to say.
I kind of want to add to what you said, Tennessee. Judaism is really encouraging because I never knew there could be something out there for somebody, that may not fit in with maybe just expectations from, a certain, like Christianity upbringing, or, it just, you feel so alienated from yourself, or alienated because, there's other things going on. But the one thing I like about Judaism is I feel so welcome. When I first went to my temple, Shabbat, it was so welcoming. Like I felt at home, and I've never even been there. It just was so nice to be able to go someplace and just feel welcome and not ashamed for being who I am. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people also feel similarly.
That's such a profound statement you said right there. No one should ever feel ashamed or made to feel ashamed of who they were born to be. And Tennessee, what you brought up with that comment, right? There are people in the world who have hatred and who will show it in lots of ways and who will exclude and put down someone. But it's really important for everyone to know that wherever you are on the journey, that's okay. Like you are a sacred human being, and the Jewish community should be a place where you can always feel uplifted as the sacred person who you are. So I'm glad you brought that in.
Rabbi Cassie, if I may.
Yeah,
I guess I'm listening to these comments and I think they're very profound. I think also we should keep in mind, and one of the things that I love about Judaism is its transparency in the sense that you have and you proclaim Orthodox conservative reform. And I say that because I know and have been very close to Jewish people of each of those three groups. And I have to say, not necessarily in the different groups do you have the type of openness we're talking about here. And I say that you're transparent because I think a challenge with Christianity and particularly Catholicism is you have that range, you have that, you know, from one end of the spectrum to the other, but we don't admit to it, or at least the hierarchy doesn't admit to it. And I think we see the same thing in Islam. I think we see the same thing in so many religions. And I think part of what we're trying to understand here is, regardless of where you find personally your comfort level on that spectrum, to be able to understand and appreciate the beauty of the faith.
Yeah,
I think.
That's great. You know, for me, it's very important at the end of all this that he says, but I want you to know that I'm the boss, you know, that you will have no other gods before me. And I think that that statement is even more significant when you think about the other religious faiths that have a hierarchy where the, you know, the priests or whoever's in power is almost seen as a direct representative of God. And so he says to us very clearly, I am your God, I'm your only God. And basically you're obligated and you speak directly to me. You know, we don't have a confessional. We just close our eyes and say, hey, so, you know,
please forgive me.
or I forgive myself. Yeah, you know, even more powerfully. So it really is important to me that at the end of it, he says, I'm the one.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, the part where he talks about you were up face to face, the Eternal One spoke to you on the mount out of the fire, and then he says, I stood between the Eternal and to you at the time to convey the eternal words to you. I think one, as you kind of talk about the connection with the general far reaches of the Jewish community, it's kind of both emphasizing that you haven't missed out, like that you don't need to have been there from the beginning, and that doesn't mean that you've missed this, that everyone was there. And I think that it kind of reminds me of that it seems like an ongoing theme in Judaism, just because in the book of Ruth, I remember when Ruth, literally they say to her that, like, it is harder for you to be an outsider and to join the community. And because I was just thinking of that because of the holidays that just passed, and yeah, it just felt relevant to this.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to chime in for a moment too. And I think I'm forgetting the name here, Jure, but so I really identify with a lot of what you're saying. And I know my background with religion is actually evangelical Christian. And a lot of the texts, a lot of the teachings is God is to be feared. And just in these like texts and the language, it's very inclusive. God seems to be a very supportive and accessible. And I think all of that is very, it's like welcoming, it's empowering. Those are the words that come to mind, but it's not fearful. I don't feel that. And so I know Tennessee was kind of mentioning about when it comes to like conversion and how that might be perceived. I think, yes, I know I'm fully aware of that, but I have the understanding that most of, or a large percentage of the Jewish community doesn't in fact feel that way, because it's founded in the teachings. And I say that just with like very brief knowledge. I'm not trying to blanket my statements on the Jewish community, but just my 2 cents on that.
And all I want to say to just also follow up, I'm sorry, is I have an issue, because I remember I used to cry as a kid, because you're taught from a young age, you need to fear God, you need to fear going to hell. Anything you do that's a sin, you're going to go to hell, you better tell God you're sorry. For a kid, it's such a scary thing, because then you're telling me, oh, so I'm supposed to fear God like maybe I fear one of my parents. And if you don't have very good parents in your life, maybe you're going to fear God too and not want to associate. That's my personal experience. So it's not everybody's, but yeah. And everybody has their own, but yeah.
I carry a lot of personal trauma from my upbringing as a second generation Catholic Mexican, where it's very strict, and God is someone to be feared. If you break this sin, if you do this, if you do that, if you do this, then you're guilty and you could go to hell. And we had to sit there and we had to tell our priests all of our sins. And it was just like a very invasive process. And
didn't you see people around you sinning as well? Wasn't that so confusing?
Yeah, and it's like only God could judge you, but at the same time,
must have been
everyone's judging each other. And it's like growing up in that environment as a 10-year-old, as an 8-year-old, and when I reached around 17, it really messed me up, and it gave me a lot of, I guess, trauma and emotional baggage, and I ended up hating God, and I guess pushing him away and pushing away the idea of like
my dad did. And that's why I wasn't close to that religion, and because I know he must have gone through exactly what you described.
I'm so sorry you had that experience.
Yeah,
and I know that's not the core of what Catholicism is, right? I'm no expert on Catholicism, but I can understand like the pain that comes along with that. This is so vulnerable and brave what you're talking to right now, and I would love to find more time and more space to be able to do that. I have to transition us a little bit, but the next piece of this, I think, could be really helpful, actually, because what we're going to talk about now and look at is different ideas of what God is, right? We studied these 3 texts and talks about how God appeared within these 3 texts of creation, of redemption, of revelation. And now I'm going to share with you 70 different names of God that appear in the Torah. And this is on the sheet that was sent out. I'm also going to put this up on the screen in just a moment. But everyone here, what you're going to be tasked with, and this is going to be different for every single individual, will be looking at this list, circle the names of God that most resonate for you. What are the names that feel right to you? And I want you to make a mark like through 5 names of God that really are not working for you for whatever reason. Okay? And to just spend time figuring that out. If you don't have the sheets printed out in front of you, that's okay. Grab a pen and paper and just write them down in a column in front of you. Okay? So let me share these names with you. Whoops. There we go. These are the 70 names of God. I'm just going to give everyone a few minutes to do this. Whoops, sorry. Now you know.
And this is names we don't vibe with, right?
Yeah, so it's 5 names that you really do like for God.
Then 5 names
you really do not.
Okay.
Okay, and just spend some time figuring that out.
I think I might have some of them might be somewhere in the middle for me because I just don't know. yet.
That's okay. Just do the best you can, Ashley, okay?
Okay.
I have a question. Weren't there 72 names?
So, I mean, there's different teachings around this, right? Of how many names there are. But one of the most common teachings in Judaism is that there's 70 names for God.
Okay, thank you.
And then as you finish picking out your 5 names you like and the 5 names you don't, I invite you also to make a mark next to 5 names that you're curious about. I'm going to give everyone just another minute or two. Okay, if you didn't fully finish, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm actually going to set up breakout rooms just because I want us all to have some chance to process some of what we were just doing with what we call a chavruta partner. There's this idea of studying with another person. I'm actually going to create rooms of 3. I know a couple of you messaged me that you're not thrilled about the idea in breakout rooms. I invite you to encourage yourself to lean into that a little bit. This is an opportunity just to get to know someone new and to talk a little bit about God. So I'm going to set up a breakout room. It's only going to be for about 3 minutes. And I'm actually even going to click the button to let you pick your own room. So if there's someone who you really want to be in a room with, you'll have the freedom to be able to do that on your own. And if someone has a problem, just let me know. I'll be going around. Okay.
What are we doing in the rooms?
Yes, in the rooms, good question. In the rooms, what I want you to do is talk about the names that you picked, right? What names really resonated for you and why? What did you have a strong reaction to? To just talk through your conception of God with one another. That's what I want you to do for a few minutes. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Okay. A couple people didn't get the document, it looks like. I will resend it once I have everyone in rooms. I invite you just to click on the link to go into your room.
I don't have a link.
Why didn't that work? Okay, for some reason.
I got the little blue. It says the host has open breakout rooms. Please wait to
for some
reply.
reason it did not.
Okay.
Yeah, it didn't automatically do it. I think I did it wrong. I'm going to try it again. Hold on one more time.
Didn't break.
Sorry, for some reason it did not work the way that it was supposed to. I
wouldn't know.
something wrong. Give me 1 second and I'll be able to fix it, but I have to wait till these rooms close. So
Okay.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Zoom keeps changing its settings and I just can't keep up with it.
Really? I was wondering.
Constant changes.
Based on the way the teachers have been, I was wondering.
Sorry, in 20 seconds, I'll be able to do this the right way. I apologize.
Are we going to, though, automatically go into a room?
Yes,
That's what
you
I'm
should.
used to. Okay.
I will do
I
it
don't
again.
do anything. I just zoom to a room, correct? Okay.
You should. I'm going to try this again to make it work. Okay. Recreate. All right. Sorry, guys.
It kicked us out.
It did because I messed it up to begin with. So I'm going to do it again. You should be whisked away. I hope that this will work the way it needs to.
Thank you. Round tech 2.
Exactly. Here we go.
It's like Harry Potter, but different.
No.
That was quick.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I know there isn't enough time to go through it all because there's so much to talk about. And again, like I said, we're just like touching the surface of a lot of things. So I'm sorry if I cut you out mid-sentence. I really, really am. But I want to invite us here. Are there any names on the list that surprised you from names of God?
Queen.
Yeah.
It was so weird how patriarchal it all was.
And then I put it on my good list.
I put it on my curious about it list, our queen.
Yeah, the one I was curious about was all the rocks.
Oh, yeah.
Rock.
All the
Green
rocks.
rock.
I saw rock, but I didn't see all the rocks. Oh, okay.
Rock confuses me a lot.
Interesting. Ooh, if
I
you're
gotta wonder. I gotta wonder if Dwayne Johnson knew that rock could be a word for God.
I just want to quickly say he's called our rock and our redeemer. I was just going to say that in the breakout room when the breakout room ended.
I'm sorry, Myra. Yes.
Oh no! I'm just sharing. I was going to tell that to the other gal I was but he's called our rock and our redeemer. So I never thought about it before, but that's what he's called sometimes.
Or sometimes another human being will call another, like a spouse or someone, their rock. And that never really resonated with me, calling someone that. So maybe now I know where it came from.
You'll find your rock.
Like the rock of all creation, of everything. It's like, what about the fish? What about us?
The one that was really interesting to me was Heart's Delight. I've never heard something like that, but I thought it was just such a sweet way to refer.
Like peace, that sense of peace.
Like that fullness.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say fullness, because that's what I use too. Like the names are like the ones that fill you up. It's kind of this like indescribable feeling, but I got that from Creator of All Heavenly Lights.
I got that one from that too.
A lot of
I
people
know that's really lyrical, but I mean it just was so visual, and it was such a strong representation, because like when I see God everywhere, right? So you look at the heavens, the stars, and that's what really struck me as very powerful, as you know, all heavenly lights. It covers the universe and everything in between.
I also liked it because I'm an aerospace engineer. I love outer space. I love that's what I'm studying. That's what I do. And that kind of tied like my passion, which is, you know, the heavens, the stars, and how I feel about what I do is I'm exploring God's kind of creation that he set out for us. So I really liked Creator of Heavenly Lights.
I liked Eternal. I like Eternal for some reason, because I feel like it covers all of that that you guys talk about. But that's just me.
You're not alone. I definitely love Eternal. Infinite One, Ruler of the Universe. I love expansive stuff that just is like
infinity.
Infinity. Soul of Souls was pretty good too. That was a new one for me.
Sustainer of life.
I had Sustainer.
Infinite One.
Yeah.
And I thought Soul of Souls was great. And I like the word presence also. And the delight, was it Heavenly Delight? I don't remember. But I liked that one. I thought that was delightful.
Yeah, Heart's Delight.
Heart's Delight. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I have a question about House of Adonai, and I know what it means, but I don't, you know, I want to dig like way deeper into that one. That one seemed like the most like powerful in text. I think it's like what I am most familiar with seeing. And like I said, I know what it means, but I want to like know what it means.
Well, Adonai being, I guess, you know, I know you said you know what it means, so, you know, but it's funny because I think Adonai was the one that stood out the most to me. That was the one that I feel like is how I interpret God is as Adonai, and I guess House of Adonai would be, you know, House of God is what I'm assuming, which, you know, I could be wrong, but yeah.
Right, Cassie, exactly two of the ones that were kind of missing for me that I always identify with, Hashem isn't in there, and YHVH isn't in there, and those have this kind of they bring this kind of tears in my eyes recognition of God as words. So I was surprised they weren't there.
Yeah, this is not a all-inclusive list, right? God is referred to as a womb. God is referred to, like Hashem is a later name. It means the name that's used to refer to God. But yes, it is a powerful name of God, right? So if there are names that resonate for you that weren't on this list, that's okay. This is just to show the wide berth of understandings of God. Sometimes we hear the three-letter word God, and we might have an image that's been kind of plastered in our brains. And this is saying, no, look at the rune here. Look at the different ways in which we can relate to God. And that's pretty cool. And we might resonate with one, and our best friend might not resonate with that one at all. They might resonate with the one that we say, oh, no, that's not for me. And that's okay. That's actually beautiful. One thing I just wanted to quickly say is sometimes, first of all, Adonai, really quickly, stands for Adon, which means like master, essentially, if you were to translate that directly. And the I ending means my. So in its most kind of simple form, what it means is my master. Now that might feel a little more off-putting, but we have to understand the context in which it was originally created, right? And now, very often when you have Yud He Vav He, those Hebrew letters that are spelled out, we pronounce them as Adonai. Sometimes people try to pronounce it like a Y sound, a H sound, a V sound, and a He sound at the end. And in Judaism, that's not actually what we do, because there's this idea that God is intangible. And so we try not to pronounce that one name that is so much bigger than anything that we can pronounce. But instead we use Adonai as a stand-in for it.
Okay.
Rabbi, are all of these names in the Torah, or are these from many Jewish texts?
Most of them are from the Torah. Some of them are more rabbinic interpretations, but they're all, you know, traditional names of God that have been passed down for some time.
I ask because one of the challenges in Christianity is we have so many different translations and versions of the Bible, and it gets very confusing depending upon which version you use. And with Judaism, you can turn to the Torah and you have a text that you can go to.
Every translation is itself an interpretation. And so you still can run into that problem if you're not a fluent Hebrew speaker, right?
Okay.
So that's absolutely true. One other thing that I just want to mention is that the name of Israel, right? The name of people Israel is Yisrael, which means one who wrestles with God. And so there is an idea that it actually is such a positive thing to be wrestling with God, wrestling with our conception of God. So if we didn't have answers to the questions before about what names of God work for us, that's okay. We're supposed to be wrestling.
We wouldn't come to him, or we wouldn't think of him maybe as often.
Exactly. We have had such rich discussions tonight that we're not going to be able to get to everything I had planned. And that actually is awesome, because there was a lot of vulnerability and trust and really getting into things tonight that I'm so impressed, and I'm so humbled, and I'm so grateful for all of you for doing this. So I'm going to share just a small snippet of what it was. This way you can be connected with it. And there was a video I was going to show that I'm going to email out so that you can look at after. And the last text that I was going to bring in was this, the Shema. Now, the Shema is considered to be one of the most important Jewish prayers there is. It is just a few lines, and those lines are Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, which is, Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. And so as we're looking at this one text right here, I just want to invite you, what do we learn about God from this text? Why do you think this text is so foundational to Judaism?
Foundational, like you said, it simplifies it right there, because it is one. God is one. Everything, all encompassing, one.
It separates us from the view of many gods that people hold on, so it makes us sort of special.
One view.
Or one community, right?
Yeah.
What also strikes me too is that it's saying hear, O Israel, like it's funny because Israel is God's people. So obviously God's people knows that, you know, Adonai is our God. But you're saying it again to them, like you're praising it, and it's like a celebration almost.
I like that it says Adonai is our God.
Yeah, really important, that piece of community right there, Sunny. Thank you.
And it doesn't say that like he rules over us or anything. It just says that it emphasizes the relationship between, again, that are, and he is the one, like he is the only God that we believe in. He is the unifier.
I think it summarizes Revelation, where it's basically seems to me like those are the shortest version of Revelation part that we just read, the last one. He says, people of Israel, then you believed in me and I'm your only God.
I believe it reinforces a covenant that we have with God to remind all of Israel that Adonai is our God. And there is only
for
one.
me, thanks, Gail. And for me, it also says that Adonai is our God and Adonai is one, which means Adonai is each one of our individual gods and different to all of us. And so we have to know that there is just one God. But like we talked in our breakout room, if you have 10 children, they all call you mom and dad. And that or my mom and my dad, but God is different to all of us, and there is only one God, and he's all of our gods. And so I just love that prayer.
So important that we're commanded to say it every night.
And every morning.
Oh, forgot about that.
I think it comes to life when it's sung. I think it brings a lot of beauty when you can hear it, not just spoken, but to hear it sung, and also in a congregation to hear everybody come together. It's really uplifting.
How do you pray? Because again, in Catholicism and in Christianity, like it's a set like pose you have to do, like on your knees like this. How do you pray in this?
So this is a prayer that they're actually, this isn't going to surprise you too much, I think, by the end of this, but there are different ideas about how to say this particular prayer because it's so important, right? There are Jews who specifically stand for this prayer if they're able to do so because it's so important. There are Jews who will say it in whatever position they are in because it's just wherever I am, I'm going to say this prayer right now. There are people who close their eyes specifically to say these words so that they can fully concentrate on them. And there are people who purposefully look at the world around them as they say these prayers. And you know what? All of them are right. And there's a power in that. But this prayer, you're right, Laurel, of course, that this is typically chanted and said out loud.
Can I ask a question? It says Adonai is one. Can one, or has it been interpreted as being other than just one God, also just, like is one as being sort of one with the universe, sort of thing? Is there?
I think so.
The thing is, this is up for interpretation, right? There's so many different ways to understand this particular prayer. We've heard a bunch of them. One of the other ways to understand it is, hear, O Israel, hear people Israel, right? Everyone, no matter how diverse you are, no matter how many different places you come from, no matter what you're bringing to the service, your politics, your anything, we are one. As a people, we are one together. It could be God is one, or perhaps, there is this idea of oneness with everything. I love that. They're all correct.
Rabbi, this is Terry. I'm kind of thinking about this in parallel to the very first passage that we read about, our having dominion over the animals or whatever on the earth. And one of my very first Torah studies, the teacher, his interpretation of the Hebrew was, it's not dominion over, but dominion with. And I've never forgotten that, because it really put a whole different perspective on that we're in partnership with everything on the planet, not just the animals, the vegetation and everything. So the gentleman who just asked if Adonai is one, has that ever been interpreted to mean the oneness of everything? I tie that back to that first passage to say that we are in oneness with everything, right, in the world. So that works for me.
That's beautiful, Terry. Thank you. And I know there is so much more here. And like I said, I have a video about the Shema to go a little bit more in depth. I will follow up with this, sending you all the videos so you can watch it. It's not long, but I realized I said this would go till 8:30 and it is already 8:38. I encourage you to stay around for just a couple more minutes because I want us to just go back to our first screen, like I said I would, with Learn, so that we can just reflect on what it is that we've learned today about God and spirituality. So is there anything that comes to mind for you?
I love how, go on, Terry, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say that there's many dimensions to God to explore.
Adonai is one.
Everybody receives the Torah in different ways. There's multiple truths. And they're all right again.
He has a lot of names.
Many paths to God.
I liked that you said Yisrael means wrestling with God. I like that.
Great.
Was the name House of Adonai? Was that the name that was in the list?
Mm-hmm.
House of Adonai, yeah.
Okay.
So that some of these names surprised us.
Yeah, that was a new one for me. Makes sense though.
Yeah, Heart's Delight. The person, Irvin, I believe, I was talking to, we both were like, Heart's Delight is such an interesting term. I've never heard
it. Makes me laugh. I don't know why.
Maybe that's a delight.
There you go.
Yeah, like a dessert. I don't know.
And at the same time, like I feel like us laughing at that name, it brings us joy in of itself.
Yeah.
This is Irv. I can tell you what I learned. I was partnering with Ray, and surprisingly, given the vast age difference, we came up with so many alike answers to the three questions. It was very surprising to me.
Yeah.
I learned there's a lot of people who are interested in Judaism, even when they're not born Jewish, and that we have a lot of interesting people in this class.
Yeah. I don't know how to put that down, but you're absolutely 100% right.
Many walks of life.
There we go.
Diverse group.
Yeah.
And again, same with Irvin. I was put into a group with people with a very vast age gap between us. And it struck me because we both had at least two names in common in our like and or not like. So again, we're diverse, but there's so much similarities between us.
Yeah.
I think something I learned is that the more you study and talk, the more questions you have.
Very scholarly.
Those questions never die down, huh?
And what a blessing that is, right?
I'm looking forward to it.
It's not about fear.
Yeah, I definitely have learned from this and also from the temple I go to. You don't have to fear God. You can talk to God.
Why?
Right in the beginning of the I don't know what you call Bible or whatever, we have direct line to God, that people are speaking to God or have an direct relationship, that you don't have to go through Jesus.
Yeah. Just speak right directly, right from the heart. I think this is a really beautiful list. And I hope that we can continue to kind of reflect on this and bring some of this with us to our next class. I'm going to be following this up, of course, with that video that I said. And I know there's a lot of questions and things in the chat that I wasn't able to see while leading. If there is any question that you really would like a follow-up with, I'm going to try to get everything that I can from the chat so that I can follow up. But if there's anything else, you have my email. Feel free to reach out anytime. And I'm just so grateful for all of you. And next time when we come together, we'll be able to move into our second class, which focuses around Torah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So can I just ask everyone who's present here today? I'm from India. You probably are aware that it's going through a really tough time. If you are religious and believe in God, then please pray.
Absolutely.
At my next Shabbat, I'll definitely be thinking about you and about India as well. Thank you so much.
Same here. You're in my thoughts.
God bless India.
Thank you.
And every morning I do a short program online because right now we're in the period between Passover and the holiday of Shavuot. I'll talk a little bit about those holidays later on. But every morning I do a short teaching and we say what's called a Misha Barak prayer, a prayer for healing. And as we're saying that tomorrow, we'll certainly be thinking about you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. I hope you have a lovely evening. If anyone wants to stay around to ask any questions, you're welcome to do so. I'm going to stop recording now.